Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Mirikitani with another episode of Weighing In, brought to you by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear. I apologize, ladies and gentlemen. We were off the air last week. Grant was traveling. I was traveling. Mark became the CEO of the train station. But it's at the end of the day, it's my fault for not getting us on the air. But welcome back, boys. Mark, how are you?
Good. It's hot in Iowa.
Yeah, heat advisory here. GT, how are you, brother?
Oh, just doing big things. Just doing big things.
Always doing big things. All right, let's start with Fargo. So, Mark, as the person that was not in Fargo, but probably watched a lot of it, heard a lot about it, what thoughts, reactions, spin it so that Iowa somehow had the best tournament of the week?
Well, I think Wisconsin probably had the best tournament of the week in Fargo. I think they had 5 champions and juniors.
Illinois and Pennsylvania were the teams that won, though.
They had the numbers, but I'd say 5 champions is a pretty dang good week for Wisconsin. Idaho won their first Greco title, first title ever as a state. That was very impressive. Congratulations to them.
Yeah.
The women have taken over Fargo. The numbers that they're putting up there is amazing, and I'm glad they got their own stage for 2.5 days. That was kind of nice. So, yeah, I'd say it was a huge success this year, David.
Yeah, before I go to GT, the numbers are misleading. You're right, Mark, but it's actually bigger because juniors and cadets went, or U16s, I'm old school, I'll call them cadets, because they went simultaneously, the numbers were less than they would have been because girls couldn't double up and wrestle both tournaments. Like there was a bunch of young ladies the year before that wrestled in cadets and then juniors, and they couldn't now. So the numbers are even bigger because it's not like one person can count as 2 entries. These are all separate human beings.
Sure.
And your point about Wisconsin, AWA, let's give the Askren brothers, John Messenbrink, that whole crew, good Lord, right? Like it'd be interesting to see what they placed as a state by themselves, but those cats did some damage for sure, right?
David, I think a lot of it was same what happened last year with Iowa when they won it. I think if you would have added Seabolt's team alone, they would have won it over any other state. So, I mean, these kids clubs have become so prevalent in the last few years that they're just – and I'm not even sure some of these kids train every week with them. They just end up on that team somehow. So, but I'm sure the guys that are, the top-level guys have been with those clubs for a while.
Yeah, for sure. So, GT, the most important question, how many pallets were sold?
A lot. It was great. It was a great environment. New format. If anybody didn't know that, it was, women's break, basic men's freestyle break, Greco, done.
Yes, the break was, I think, good. All right, so go ahead. What were your other thoughts? Because then I got a couple discussion points.
Well, I just think, it was a really great year for Fargo. It was a great year for USA Wrestling up there. 30 mats, historic event. The showcase for the women's finals was great. I think what Mark was alluding to is like really, really powerful to see, it packed that way. The women's teammates and the men's teams were all there for that finals. So it was very electric in the building. And then, of course, like on the other stuff, we'll get to probably some of the more of the wrestling things. But, yeah, huge shout-out to Idaho. Great call-out, Mark. That's a really big deal. First time ever that they had won. So,
yeah, it was significant. So a couple of the logistical things, they moved the platform match to the one edge from the middle. And I didn't know why. But somebody was complaining. I go, I'm pretty sure this is going to end up being awesome, just based on the history of USA Wrestling, knowing what the hell they're doing. And sure enough, they had the finals there. But what was great was when it was in the middle, it's a football field, so there's nobody really close. You know, the end zones are really far. So you have to be on the 50-yard line, but you're far away. So now the end zone, I'm waving my hands and people are like, I'm turning into a lunatic, but everybody on the end zone could see it way better. And they had the finalists pop out of the walkway from the steps up there, which was kind of disastrous the first time because there was kids that were on the floor that didn't know they were supposed to be warming up there. But once they got it figured out, it was awesome. Dort and Sandy had the girls' finals hyped. It was like a freaking concert in there, and you know the crowd is singing to Neil Diamond and everything else. So the energy was very, very cool, and Fargo might be the biggest networking joint in the country when you talk about how many people. So Mark, I owe GT wings at this point. I have no idea if it's based on bets, but I drank my way to a plate of wings, I'm sure, that one night. So I owe him wings the next time I see him. And got to hang out with him and the P&L boys one night, which was a lot of fun. And then we ran into the Oklahoma State guys. And so, but there's just a ton of networking that goes on up there. Any individual storylines, individual kids, stuff like that, like things that pop out. I'll go first. Like I'm working on another tournament that in Kansas City, and I talked to Bobby Thompson, and he said Drayshawn Ross is going to go up to 220 this year. Like there's no need for him to cut any weight. I know you guys are obviously, everybody in wrestling is familiar with him, but he also said just what a quality human being that kid is. And I think that's the stuff that doesn't get enough publicity, right? Like he's got the resume where he could kind of be a jerk and get away with it. And he's not. He had to wear the mask based on what happened to him at junior duels, but just truck drove some people. Mac Mauger took first and third, but his record at Fargo is like 37-1 or something insane. And I think the other storyline that I thought was interesting was the legacy angle. You know, like Mako's son, Schwab's son, Damian Logan's son, all these cats going and getting stop signs. And also these kids were not all superstars at age 6. These kids do not look like they're getting burnt out. Their dads kind of brought them along at the right pace. I ran into Andy Rovat, who I got to do the play-by-play with a couple of years ago, and he was posting pictures because he was on the Olympic team with all these guys, you know, with Steve and with Doug and Daniel. So, you know, there's a ton of storylines there, but, you know, GT, what else did you see? I know you were kind of, by the way, very impressive office you had set up back there in the, in the catacombs. That was impressive.
Yeah, the warehouse office is always great. I think, and I don't necessarily have a lot of specifics that I would probably necessarily take away from, you know, just, I don't know, like maybe some individual performances. I think there was a whole bunch of Triple Crown winners that were announced. I can't remember them all by name. You know, just basically like also some of the post-match interviews were really, I thought, just in general, really great. Once again, not to necessarily single out anybody, but I think in summation, or, you know, basically compilation of everything that was great, there was just some really good moments interview-wise. There were some really great moments wrestling-wise within the finals. But I think just all in all, I think it was just just probably one of the better Fargos I've been to, just pure aesthetically, wrestling wise, the competition level, you know, having some of those hitters there. And then of course, you know, having some guys that are like Triple Crown guys that are like, hey, you know, they wrestle all 3 styles. They're been a part of the system, you know, so it was really cool to see.
Well, and you joined this pod when we came to USA Wrestling because we need to do a great job in the summer as well as the winter, where Mark and I kind of specialize. And these kids are the future, right? Like these are the kids in the next 8 to 12 years, depending on their age, maybe sooner, that we're going to see on world and Olympic teams at the senior level. So Marco, individual storylines, anything like that?
Well, you know, number one, I think Flo did a really good job broadcasting the matches. There's a few difficulties, but when you got 30 mats going, it's really hard to have everything run that smooth. I guess I wish they would have. I guess one thing I would have asked Flo to do different is to put the bout sheets up so you kind of know what mats guys are going to. But I don't know if the kids even know what mats they're going to go to. So I'm not sure it's set in stone like some of the other tournaments that they run. But it's tough to go through 30 mats and try to find certain kids wrestling because you have no idea. So it's kind of hit and miss.
People said the notifications weren't working. As a guy that was on the floor, they got that gigantic scoreboard on both sides. And if a kid says, like, I'm bout number 3,211, you just got to be watching the rotation. And then the tricky thing is the bout numbers for cadets or U16s are completely different from the bout numbers for juniors. Probably the worst scenario was the first day of boys. They just didn't know what bout number they were going to stop at. And so people ended up staying for 2 or 3 hours that didn't need to, myself included. Go ahead.
But I think Larkin out of Arizona looked extremely good. He was very, very impressive. And, we had guys that have been there in the finals before and won the 220-pounder out of California. I think is it Merrill?
Merrill.
Yeah.
Merrill.
He was impressive, not wrestling all of last year because of injuries or maybe just one tournament. And he'd only been training for 3.5 weeks for this. So to go through there and walk through it like he did shows how much talent this kid has. And then Ross at Fort Dodge, it was fun watching him. He's got a phenomenal gut wrench. He was bringing people back in that were trying to get off the mat and then getting them again for the last time. I think he may have only given up 4 points the whole tournament and 2 styles. And that was off of one move that he hit. The guy countered him and kind of tossed him toward his back and ended up giving up 4. But besides that, I don't think he gave up any points the whole tournament. So, I mean, for a 15-year-old to do that, David, he did it at 14, but to come back at 15 and do it again, pretty impressive. I'm really happy for him and his family.
100 years ago when we wrestled on dirt and in black and white, I won that tournament, but I certainly didn't look as good as him doing it. Like, he was killing people. So, yeah, a couple of things that stuck out to me. I think I talked to you guys about this when I came back from Chicago, that Morgan Turner. I told you guys she was a superstar. She goes and wins it, and right before she's going to Worlds. So it's cool to see Beat the Streets, not just helping kids at the lower level, but developing some high-level people. The kids had doubled up. I think the extra day, I mean, they switched to the old school, used to be Greco, then freestyle. Now it's freestyle, then Greco. And then I think the extra day probably gives people more incentive to stay. If we kind of go back to the big picture of Fargo, I think there's a couple things to consider. This is probably the point of the show where Grant reminds me to make sure I tell people that these are my opinions and not those of USA Wrestling. So Grant's my consultant on these things. But they're going to – I'm guessing – girls Greco is coming, okay? And I also think there's a chance they're going to separate cadets from juniors. Like back when I wrestled, they were 3 or 4 weeks apart. And I also think Fargo, even though it's a pain in the tuchus to get to, is probably the best place to hold it because the safety factor of you can walk across campus and nothing bad's going to happen. It's Fargo. It's the middle of summer. It was actually like unseasonably cool there, GT. Like, it was actually pleasant. And they got dorms, but like they were oversold by 300 rooms last year because of all the double ups. And again, USA Wrestling didn't say this, but I think the idea of keeping the boys and girls separate is probably a good idea just for all kinds of smart reasons. But I could see cadets being a tournament and then juniors being a tournament, and then kids can double up. Especially in girls, because a lot of those kids like Sabrina Nosh, shout out, I met her dad, Jeremy, with Mario Flores. Like last year, she and Savannah Isaac both doubled Fargo, one cadets and juniors, and they couldn't do that this year. So, I think those are some things they're going to consider. USA Wrestling does a phenomenal job of running that tournament. And they also did a really good job on their social. And GT is the youngest guy of our group, putting up the pictures of the champs, putting up the interviews. They had a photo booth there set up. Like they've always been good at the steak, and they've made a concentrated effort to get better at the sizzle. And one of the things I like about Gary Abbott and what he's done for us is he's never censored us, right? Like we can say what we really think, and as long as we use non-profane words, we're allowed to. But I got to give them a shout out. They just did an unbelievable job. Rob K, Sandy, Dort, Pete, Gary, Emil, the whole crew. I know I'm missing people, Monica, they got a crew, and those people know what they're doing, and they buckle down and go to work. And then we should also shout out there's a million referees that go up there and basically donate their time, and guys that are super high level like Danny Blackshear, Sammy Julian, like our Olympic level referees are still doing high school matches in Fargo. And that's how the next generation of referees get better. So GT, you think that's going to end up happening where they'll separate or at least add, first question, girls Greco?
Ooh, yeah, this is where I would have to make sure that I do the David Mirikitani. These are just the express written words of Grant Turner. And as a national tournament or as a discipline moving forward, I'm not necessarily like in full support of like women's Greco being like added to, the LA 2028 docket. I think it's extremely important for women to understand and appreciate throws and Greco and the techniques and hand fighting and all these other things. I definitely believe that's worthy of having a tournament for women's Greco. Whether it be, whatever, a cadet national tournament, junior national tournament, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily know that I would be a proponent of women's Greco as an Olympic destination. I think it's
beach wrestling, I think, is the one that's coming, right?
I think beach has a little bit more support globally. But once again, I think everybody should learn Greco. So I think everybody that does folk style should learn Greco. I think everybody that does freestyle should learn something in Greco. There's so much technique there or something to learn from those positions that I'm just a big advocate of incorporating all of it. It's like, hey, I don't want to learn anything on top. Well, that I just think is a miss. It's like, well, you got to learn how to turn people.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, it's just you're limiting yourself, I think, on that. But as far as women's Greco, I think if it becomes a national tournament, I think that would be very interesting. As far as separating out juniors, cadets, and or women's into multiple locations, I think it becomes a calendar problem, not necessarily like a function problem. I mean, there's only so many weekends out of the year, and having everybody like coaches, support staff, your state and local leadership going, the whole thing, right? I think it just becomes extremely difficult in order to do that.
It may end up just being a 12-day event, like 2-day girls, Greco, juniors. The problem then is, juniors and cadets are still going at the same time. Then girls freestyle, then boys freestyle, and then boys Greco. You could see that. GT or Mark, any final thoughts before we jump to the next subject?
No, I hope they don't switch locations. I hope they don't change dates. I thought from what I saw, it works. So why do we keep trying to fix things that aren't working? I know kids want to get into, I have no problems with them wrestling both styles. If they want to go freestyle Greco, that's great. If they want to go cadet juniors, I don't see an issue with it, except you're going to get a lot of matches in, and it's going to be hard to compete at both because they're going at the same time. But I hope they keep it at Fargo, and I hope it's still all together, because there's no way these coaches and the staff is going to be able to take a week here and go do it and then turn around 3 weeks later and take another week off. They have other things in their lives that they got to do and families. So
training camps matter too, right?
Yep.
Like a lot of states are doing training camps, and there's peaking cycles, and you can't peak all the time. Like everybody peaks for Fargo. Plus, if they move it from Fargo, we're going to have to come up with a whole new marketing strategy, because right now it's just called Fargo. So hopefully it doesn't move, but I think separation's a real possibility. So GT, you posted this yesterday. We're recording again on Thursday. 1 year till the Olympics. Is that correct? Yesterday was 1 year till the Olympics.
Yep.
So Mark used to laugh at me because in 2017, I'd already be laying out the path to the 2020 Olympic qualifying process. But now the OCD is out of the way and we're right up on it. So everybody keep that on your schedule. Obviously an epic situation. The U17s, U20s, I talked with Cornell Robinson from Wyoming Seminary. I guess that's one last thing about Fargo. Some of these teams had an unbelievable high school teams like Sem, Edmond North, Stillwater, Poway, Faith Christian. I know I'm missing people. But as somebody who's got a lot of these teams in the Hall of Fame duels, we were looking at how many All-Americans they had. It's insane. So shout out to all these high schools that are killing it. So looking at this, the U17 tournament or U20 tournament it was, I think, because was supposed to be in Poland and it got switched to Amman, Jordan, right, Grant?
Yeah, U17s.
U17s, okay. So I think there's some political things involved there. Again, we'll put on this isn't the Voice of USA Wrestling. This was a UWW decision. I know that. It was not a USA Wrestling decision. So I saw a lot of people on social scrambling to change flights and hotels and everything. And it's only like 3 or 4 weeks out, right, GT?
Yeah, I apologize. I misspoke. It is U20 World Championships.
As I thought so, just because he said Luke was in it. And I know Luke's too old for U17s, but I also figured you were probably smarter than me. So
just the way that the article read, it was like right next to the hyperlink of U17s. So I was like, just brain fart.
No worries. Talked to James Green in person. He said he's going 70 kgs and he's just going to stay at 70 kgs. I mean, obviously he can change his mind, but at this point I think everybody here thought he's not going to go to 65, but it doesn't look like he's going to try to go to 74. I think he's just happy to be wrestling again. You know, Grant, you got a closer relationship with him than I do, but that was the feeling I got talking to him. So, okay. This one is super fascinating to me. RBY to Mexico. 57 kilos for people, just to kind of lay out the situation. Trains with Gilman, trains with all, Nittany Lion Wrestling Club. He's declared too late to go to the World Championships this year. So his 2 pass to make the Olympics. Well, he has to make the Mexico national team, which I think we all consider that a given. And then he has to either place at the Pan Ams or place at the Last Chance tournament. So Grant or Mark, let me go to you first. How easily does he make 57 kgs, and what do you think what do you think happens?
I have no idea how he's going to make 57 kgs. He's a good size 33 pounder. He's got length to him. So it's going to be a challenge, I would imagine. Him going to Mexico, it's another USA Wrestling guy that we could see at the Olympics. So I'm kind of excited for that because we do have a strong team here in the United States. I'm not saying I don't think, he'd have to be one of the front runners if he would have stayed, David. He's that talented. So, but I think he's still going to, from what I understand, he's still going to train with Nittany Lion Wrestling Club. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, Grant, that's good for Nittany Lion because it didn't look like they were going to get anybody to qualify for the Olympic team. I couldn't even get that joke out as a straight face. So to me, I think what Mark's saying is right. Like, it's interesting to see if he can make weight. I remember when we had Gilman on Matt Chat, and he talked about what a great workout partner RBY was. And if you took a short shot or if you didn't cut off the angle, how quick he was on go behinds and things like that. His skill set, he's not like he can ride folk style, but it's that back ankle hook. He's not a tilter. He's basically a takedown guy, which obviously transitions really well to freestyle. And he was he's a Fargo national champ and everything coming out of high school. Wasn't like he was just a folk style guy. What are your thoughts on his chances of making the team?
I think I want to say that there's another Mexican national tournament going on here shortly in the next week or so. I think if he makes the weight and even as a shell of himself, I think he does a very, very good job and probably makes the team in order to head to Serbia for the 2023 World Championships. As far as his ability to make some noise at the World Championship level, I mean, we've all seen RBY. He's pound for pound, one of the best collegiate wrestlers that we have in the United States. Just bar none. So right. I think, and then once again, we haven't necessarily seen him wrestle a ton of freestyle, but he's got it in him to be really, really, really talented. So I think it's a foregone conclusion that if he makes weight and like is even kind of healthy, I think he should be able to make the number one spot at 57 for Mexico. And then the real test is, what does he look like in preparation for Worlds in September? And I would say that Penn State and the Nittany Lion program have a pretty good, a fairly average training progression, and putting those guys on world teams is something that they do very well. So I would have complete faith in them and RBY to be able to do what they need to be able to do to get ready for Worlds.
Yeah, we'll clarify whether or not he's eligible for the Worlds. I think he may have declared too late, so he may just have to go to the Pan Ams to get in. And the thing that's interesting about Pan Ams are it's blind draw and there's no true second. So like him and Zane or him and Gilman or whoever the American is could be on the same side. And then obviously only one of them gets out unless they change that and make it a true second, which obviously would be great if they did. I think if you're trying to get the 16 best guys to the Olympics or women, but in this case, men. And then, I mean, I think the biggest thing is like, it's a good cycle for him, right? Like he's only going to do this till a year, right? We just talked about this, a year and 3 weeks, right? And then he can go into MMA. And he doesn't have to, I mean, he's kind of in that Miles Amin, Anthony Valencia situation, like where they know the spot is theirs once he gets it. There's, Austin Gomez, same thing. So, I think it's a lot easier to be that guy than like, think about Aaron Brooks and Zahid and David Taylor all fighting for the spot. And Miles Amin he knows he's the guy for San Marino. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out for him. But RBY's super clutch. He had a weird NCAA tournament this year. I think everybody thought he was going to win it. Almost lost to McGee and easily one of the 5 best matches of the NCAA tournament. And then him and Vito was an amazing match, but shocking just in not only who won, but the margin of victory. So, all right, GT, can you do everybody a favor and talk the collective wrestling world off of the ledge about Gable Steveson?
Yeah, so I think from the standpoint of like what is I think Gable's idea or what he's trying to be able to execute. I mean, he's been a part of the WWE for a while now. He's done show appearances, he's done other things where he gets on there and does things. So, I think from the standpoint of him making his debut on Sunday, a little plug for Gable and the WWE for all of the WWE people that are watching, weighing in. Shout out to you guys.
We got massive crossover, bro.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not affected his, shouldn't say that. The WWE has worked with USA Wrestling. They would continue to work with wherever he intends to go to school, if that is where Gable is wanting to then take his talents to. So I don't think it's an either or scenario. I think it's more of like he's making his WWE debut.
It's an and, not an or.
Correct. So I think that's the biggest way to be able to do it.
So I'm going to break it down from what you told me off air and make sure. So first of all, he's graduated, so the portal thing doesn't apply. He can just transfer. That's the number one thing people are like, well, the portal's closed. Well, it's not. Second of all, even if it was closed, it reopens and he could just transfer at the semester. He could be a 1 semester guy. Okay, that's another option. Number 2 is he can go to any school he wants. He can go to Minnesota, Iowa, or any of the other 70 some odd Division Ones. If he wanted to go to Grandview, I bet you guys would find some money for him. Okay, so and probably the most important thing is whatever he's doing with the WWE does not preclude any of this. It does not impact this. He can do this. There's that whole professionalism thing, like he's fine. And you're not saying this, GT, but Mark and I will say it, I think. He's very good at getting people to press the like button, and he's very good at getting people to pay attention. I told you guys off the air 2 years ago, when I was doing the interviews pre-NCAAs and the board was like Yanni, Carr, Brooks, RBY, and Gable, I think that was the group. Whenever it came to about marketing, social media, promotion, all of that is like they would ask one of them, they go, I think Gable's the best one to answer that question. So, I mean, he is seen as the OG, the real one among his peers in that. So Mark is somebody that doesn't root for Iowa at all. But I know, all jokes aside, loves college wrestling, and I think we'd all like to see Gable back, whichever singlet. How do you think this plays out?
Well, first, before I say anything, I want to make sure everybody knows that this is my opinions and not the opinions of anybody else except for maybe Grant, that I may have a learning disability. So besides that, I'd say I'm going to be shocked if he doesn't wrestle in college second semester next year. I think that's something he knows what he wants to do. He's just not, he's going to let it play out that people don't think now he's going to go anywhere. Kind of have people stop talking to him about it and let him do his WWE thing for the next 3 months until he starts training for the Worlds. But getting ready for the Olympics, I think a semester of collegiate wrestling is what he needs to get his body back in shape. So I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up at some university second semester. I don't think he ever planned on wrestling 2 semesters in college. I don't think that was even a question. So I think it was always going to be the last semester. He'll take, 6 hours of grad school wherever he goes to be eligible. He can transfer in. He can enter the portal in one day and be gone the next. Come in December, I think that's what a couple other guys have done. So,
or he can stay in Minnesota.
Yeah, he can stay in Minnesota too. And I that wouldn't surprise me, So I just think.
Mark, hang on real quick. Hang on real quick. GT, the world is calling you. I know you got to go take things over. So say goodbye to people and wish me a happy birthday on the air real quick.
Hey, Mark, you're right on track. Keep rolling with what you're doing. Sorry to interrupt. Happy birthday, David. Happy birthday on everything. And one final thing on Gable is that we all want him back in collegiate wrestling. We all want him to do international wrestling. We all want him to do WWE. He's from our community. Let's continue to root him on to do all of the things that he wants to be able to execute and just be a part of the process and love every minute of it. Now, if you're a Minnesota fan, continue to be a fan of Gable. If you're of a suitor of Gable and he doesn't come, it's not the end of the world, guys. But just have fun with the process. Enjoy it. It's electric. We have one of our own doing big things. So all sorts of fun stuff.
See you, GT. Have a good weekend, bro.
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much.
All right, go ahead.
I did not know it was your birthday. You didn't tell me.
Tomorrow.
Well, then why is he wishing you happy birthday today?
Because we're recording the podcast today.
It doesn't matter. It's not your birthday today.
All right.
Well, people that want to be congratulated.
All right, go back to Gable.
You haven't accomplished it yet, David. You still have a day to go. So let's go back to what we're talking about. Anyway, I think Gable will wrestle. My opinion, he'll wrestle in college next second semester, and I don't know where that's going to be. I really don't care where it's going to be, to be honest with you. I just want to see him wrestle again. Like Grant said, I just enjoy watching him. I think it's great training for him to get ready for the 24 Olympics, and I think he's a smart guy. He'll do what he needs to do to try to win a gold medal at the Olympics, and I think getting a semester in training is what he's going to need to do.
I think there's a couple things, right? So, first of all, the WWE thing does not preclude him from being on a world team this fall. Okay. That's important. It's important that he wrestles and ideally medals or wins it. So our weight class qualifies for the Olympics, right? Like America is one of the 16 in. The second thing, it certainly seems like you guys are both right. He's not going to wrestle in the fall. Okay. If we sort of simplify it and say the 2 front runners are Minnesota and Iowa, to me, I look at this a little bit differently. I don't think Gable switches who wins the NCAAs. Okay. I'm not saying you guys do, but I'm saying I don't. I think either way, Penn State's the favorite. If he goes to Iowa, Cassiope, Olympic red shirts, Cassiope gets to train with Gable for a semester. and they get the marginal difference between what they think Gable would place and Cassiope would place. But Cassiope's been a perennial top 4 guy, so it's not like they go from 0 points to 22 or something. Yep. Okay. And then I think the other thing is just how this impacts the sport of wrestling. Like Grant is saying, like, we have somebody doing something great, and sometimes things just get caught up in the wash. We get caught up in the minutia. Like, how good is this guy that he can just wrestle for 8 weeks and he's going to be the prohibitive favorite to win nationals, right? Like, GT's dream, your dream, my dream, one of our dreams was to be an NCAA Division I champion. And, we killed ourselves and didn't do that. And this guy's next level, so I think that part's super fascinating. The other part I wanted to make is this. I think where Gable goes to school is more important, not for the team score at nationals, but because that RTC, that club, which is certainly tied to that university, will most likely have an Olympian and a very good chance at an Olympic gold medalist in terms of how much publicity your program gets. Like, how many people watch Gable, the last 10 seconds of that match, get the 2 takedowns, spin behind, hold up the 2, hug Brandon Eggum. And they're like, people that don't know anything about wrestling because he's wearing a Nike USA wrestling single, like, where does that guy go to school? Minnesota. Oh, okay. Are they good at wrestling? Yeah, they actually are good at wrestling, right? So there's nobody in the world that doesn't, everybody in the world, let me say it as a positive, everybody in the world wants that guy on the team. Like, their team for all, but I think people are missing the point. Like, us guys that are college heads, like, I don't think that that's it. Like, it helps for sure, right? You want to have a guy in the finals on Saturday night, but I think the real juice is having an Olympian and having a defending Olympic gold medalist on your team. So, I mean, I think, and then that helps you with summer camps and everything else, and ton of ancillary business to come out of that. So, quickly, there's a tournament in Poland this weekend. We have some Americans wrestling in it. It's not a ranking tournament, so we didn't spend a lot of time on it, but it is happening. So, I'm sure that's streamed live on Flow if people want to watch, and the results will be on UWW. Let's see what else we got. I think that's really about it, Mark. Any other? I guess we can circle back. We're good on time, or we can go early. What do you think? Any last Fargo thoughts?
No, I mean, you guys both brought up a lot of good points. I'm glad it went well. I'm glad you guys had fun there. I hope they don't change it, David. It's like the 3-point takedown. I don't understand it. I don't understand why we needed it. And so if it's not broke, don't fix it. And it was one of the best nationals last year, and they saying, well, our viewership was down. I go, it's not because of a 2-point takedown or a 3-point takedown. There's other stuff going on in the world, and it's going to happen. The people that love wrestling are going to always love wrestling. It's the greatest sport to me that's ever been, and it teaches young people how to become men and women that you can be proud of, hardworking people, not lazy, set goals and go after your goals. I mean, I don't know what else you could ask in life. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think we all agree with that. As far as the Fargo switch, I think it's going to be what's in the best interest of wrestling, right? Like USA Wrestling is always doing that. I think it's quite possible they split the tournament and Fargo's the location for both of them. Like, they obviously have a good working relationship with Fargo. And, I remember years ago, I talked to the St. Louis guy and I'm like, dude, you can't have these kids walking around downtown St. Louis. Like, it just doesn't work. I mean, like, there's a dome in Iowa, but like, you can't do that. Like, people walking around downtown Des Moines, like, there's just too much traffic and everything else that happens. You brought this up, so we can kick this around for a minute. I do think one thing is going to change with the 3-point takedown that is considerably different. I think we're going to see way more major decisions this year. Because, like, if you get a takedown at the end of the period, it's 3-0 versus 2-0, or 2 takedowns. It's 6-1 if you can get the ride out versus 4-2 if you didn't. And I think you're going to see bigger team scores, and also I think you're going to see more bonus points. And it's like, if you're better than me, like, dude, you got to go win by 8 because you really just need 3 takedowns.
Yep.
I mean, right? Because if you get 3 takedowns, that's 9. You get an escape, that's 10. if I get, I don't know, 2 escapes that I pick plus even the 3 escapes plus the pick down, it's 10-4, 11-4 with riding time. You just got to get a stalling point.
Yeah.
So I think you're going to see a lot where normally that match is 7-4 or something like that, so it's considerably different. So I think you're going to see a lot more majors. So I think the team point record, theoretically, I think duels are going to have higher team points, and I think the tournament is going to be interesting as well because bonuses become more and more important because it's going to be easier to get.
Yeah.
You actually agree?
I do agree with that part.
I'll take the win. I'm going to probably just quit on
Not
that.
a win, David. I still think it's a silly rule, but
No, I
I
don't
do
care
agree
that.
there'll probably be more majors. And so, when you come to the record of most points scored in a national tournament, you're going to have an asterisk next to it because it's being scored different now.
No, I get it. It's like in
than it has in the
baseball.
past.
It's like 162 versus 154 games for home runs and stuff like that. But
Yep.
I mean, listen, the only constant in life is change, right? You got to evolve. You got to stay up with it, or it's just, you're going to get passed by. The one thing you said about people loving wrestling, I think the concern they have is it's like baseball, like the aging out of people that love our sport. And how are we getting new people to not just wrestle in it, but to watch it? So I think they're trying to create more scoring. It's like the World Cup right now. Like people would rather see 7-6 than 1-0.
Well, I think USA Wrestling's done such a phenomenal job with these young kids and putting them in the spotlight. And then you got the clubs that have started up, David. And they're just so much better than we were when we were young. At least me. I'm not saying you because, I can't speak for you and how good you were in your days or how good Grant was. But these kids are they're phenomenal.
No, they're great.
You're seeing 13, 14-year-old kids that were doing things that I still don't know how they do it. And they chain wrestle like it's nobody's business. And we didn't see that back in the day. It was, you watch even Dan Gable wrestle. It was a double leg. It was a single leg. And you get on top and put his bar arm in and turn you over. And that was it, and these kids are hitting 17 different moves in one flurry and then putting somebody on their back just like that. And it's just like, how did that happen? How do you find direction like that?
No, they showed one flurry where a kid was in on a deep double leg and Kyler on Larkin, and then like 20 seconds later, Larkin had laced him up and teched him. So, yeah. I do want to give a shout out to Noah Mulvaney from Wisconsin. He won it. He's going to Bucknell. Like, I think that's cool that a kid that's not going to one of these power schools won Fargo, and he looks like a guy that's going to step right in and wrestle right away. Like, he's got one of those faces. Like, he looks older than I do. He's a grown man at 18, 19 years old. So, yeah. I got Chris Owens coming on from Idaho next week, so we'll get to talk to them about your point there. It's going to be fun. So,
Yeah.
All right, Marco, good seeing you.
Hey, David, I'll give you a call tomorrow and wish you a happy birthday.
Thanks, dude.
I'm not saying it today, though. Give your mom and dad my best, and I'm glad Grant was on today, and I feel bad we didn't have the podcast last week, but, stuff happens, so.
So, ladies and gentlemen, just so we're clear, mom and dad always get the best, and I may or may not get a birthday wish tomorrow. That's basically the headline. All right, for GT and Mark, I'm David. Thank you guys for watching and listening. We'll see you all next week.